All right, buckle up because today we are diving deep into some pretty heavy allegations against Sean Diddy Combs.
Diddy.
Yeah, Diddy. Our source material is this TMZ article that details a lawsuit. And let me tell you, this lawsuit paints a wild picture. I mean, we're talking lavish sex parties, drugs, a whole lot of secrecy. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's
So we're going to unpack all the details, see what we can learn about power in the entertainment world.
Yeah, and the allegations are coming from a former member of Diddy's entourage. This guy, Phillip Pines, claims he worked for Diddy from 2019 to 2021.
Right. And what's he saying exactly? What are these allegations?
Okay, well, he's making some pretty crazy claims about these events. They called them Wild King Nights.
Wild King Nights.
Wild King Nights. Basically,
Go on.
extravagant sex parties that Diddy would throw. Pines describes hotel rooms all decked out with red lights, tons of booze and drugs, and he even lists like specific things he was told to get, like honey packs, baby oil, even sex toys.
Okay, so we're talking like a whole production here.
Mm-hmm.
So what was this guy Pines' role? What was he doing at these parties?
Well, he says he was basically Diddy's right-hand man when it came to these things, setting everything up, making sure there was enough of everything, and then afterwards he'd have to clean up.
Oh, man.
But we're not talking like tidying up, Pines says he had to remove evidence of drug use, anything sexual.
Wow.
And he even says he was told to leave these huge tips for hotel staff.
Oh, I bet.
Probably to keep them quiet about any damage or...
Right. Keep it all hush-hush.
Exactly.
Man, it's like a real-life Wolf of Wall Street, but maybe even crazier.
Maybe. And this is where the whole power dynamic thing comes into play.
Right.
Think about it. You got Diddy, this music mogul, and then you got Pines, just an employee.
Right. And that's where things get really disturbing, right?
Yeah.
Because Pines is saying that Diddy forced him to have sex with women while Diddy watched.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It is. He describes it as some kind of loyalty test, which...
Awful.
I know, it's messed up, right?
It's really messed up.
And it brings up some serious questions about consent, coercion, exploitation.
For sure.
We're talking potentially sexual battery charges, which
Right.
in California, that could mean years in prison.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it's super important to remember these are just allegations at this point.
Right. Innocent until proven guilty and all that.
Exactly. And Diddy's lawyers have come out strong, denying everything. They say Diddy's never assaulted anyone, never trafficked anyone, and that they're totally confident he'll be cleared in court.
Right. They're basically saying this is all made up.
Yeah, and that sets the stage for what could be a really messy legal battle.
Oh, for sure. I mean, is it going to be his word against Pines' word or...
It could be, but there might be other evidence, witnesses, things like that.
Right.
Diddy's lawyers might say Pines is just making all this up for money or to try and ruin Diddy's rep. But the prosecution, they'll probably try to show that Diddy has a history of this kind of behavior, a pattern of, coercion, abuse of power.
Okay, so even if Diddy doesn't end up facing any criminal charges...
Yeah.
There's still the whole court of public opinion thing to worry about.
Oh, absolutely. This case is blown up in the media. Everyone's talking about it.
Right.
It's sparked conversations about how people in power should act and whether there's exploitation in the entertainment world.
Yeah. It's definitely a story that people are paying attention to. And on top of all this, there's this whole other thing about Diddy allegedly exposing Pines to COVID back in 2020.
Yeah, that part's really interesting.
Yeah.
Pines says that Diddy not only exposed him to the virus, but also, pressured him to stay quiet about a guest at Diddy's birthday party in Turks and Caicos.
Really?
Yeah.
So they're saying this guest might have been infected?
Yeah, potentially. And Diddy didn't want anyone to know.
Wow. So it's like on top of everything else, there's this COVID thing, too, which could mean even more legal trouble.
It could. And it makes you wonder, what else is going on?
Right. Like, what else are we not hearing about?
Exactly. This case, no matter how it ends, it's forcing us to confront some uncomfortable truths about the entertainment industry. How often does stuff like this happen, and how many people are afraid to speak up?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And it leads us to another disturbing thing that Pines is saying.
Okay.
He claims that part of his job was to, clean up after these parties.
Right.
And I don't just mean, picking up empty bottles. He's talking about removing drug stuff, condoms, all kinds of stuff.
Wow.
And he says he would leave big tips for the hotel staff to make sure they stayed quiet about any damage or compromising situations.
Yeah. That's pretty unsettling.
Yeah, it really is. It makes you think about how far people might go to protect someone powerful.
Definitely. It's about complicity and protecting powerful people.
Right. And Diddy, he's not just a musician.
Yeah.
He's got his hands in everything. Fashion, liquor, TV, you name it.
Yeah, he's built an empire.
Right, an empire.
Yeah.
So how could these allegations impact his business?
You know, that's what a lot of people are wondering.
Yeah.
Even if he's never found guilty in court, all this bad press could really hurt his image.
Right.
And that means lost money. Brands might not want to be associated with him anymore.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a domino effect. One thing leads to another,
Right.
and it can affect every part of his life.
Right. Especially for someone so public.
Exactly. And it all comes back to that question of power.
Right.
When you have a ton of influence,
Right.
your actions have bigger consequences, you're under a microscope.
Okay, so this isn't just some legal case.
No.
It's about the responsibility that comes with fame and fortune.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that even in this glamorous world,
Yeah.
there's a dark side
Right.
that we can't ignore.
Yeah, this deep dive has definitely shown me that
Yeah.
it's a lot to take in, but we need to talk about these things.
I agree. Shining a light on these issues is the only way to make things better, to
Right.
create more accountability, more transparency.
Exactly. Now, before we wrap up this part, let's make sure we're all on the same page with some of these legal terms. You mentioned sexual battery. Can you break that down for us? What does that actually mean?
Sure. Basically, sexual battery means any intentional, unwanted touching of someone's private parts for sexual reasons. It doesn't have to involve intercourse. Things like groping or forced kissing, that counts too. And it's a big deal legally. It's not the same as rape.
Okay. And what about this term sex trafficking? We've heard that a lot lately. What does that mean exactly?
So sex trafficking is when someone is recruited, transported, or forced into commercial sex acts. It often involves coercion or trickery, and it's a serious human rights violation.
Okay. Got it. And one last term. Defamation. How could that come up in this case?
Defamation is when someone makes false statements that hurt someone's reputation. It can be spoken, that's slander, or written, that's libel. In this case, Diddy's lawyers might say that Pines is making stuff up to damage Diddy's public image.
So basically they could say Pines is lying to hurt Diddy's career.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, well, we've got a lot of legal ground to cover here, and we'll be exploring all of this more as we continue our deep dive.
Yeah.
But for now, let's take a break. We'll pick up this conversation in part 2.
Sounds good. What really gets me about this whole thing is how detailed Pines is in this lawsuit. He's not just throwing out accusations.
Right.
He goes into specifics about what he was told to get for these Wild King nights.
Uh-huh.
Honey packs, baby oil, even mentions like power banger sex machines. It's like reading a shopping list for some crazy party.
Yeah, you're right. It is. It's like we're getting a peek behind the curtain,
Yeah.
into this world we don't usually see.
Right.
But, I mean, it also makes you wonder, is he maybe exaggerating some of this stuff, making it sound worse than it really was?
I mean, that's a good question, and it's something Diddy's lawyers are probably going to jump on.
Right.
They might try to say that Pines is making stuff up to make people feel sorry for him or
Yeah.
to try to get more money out of this lawsuit.
It's like they're both playing this high-stakes game,
Yeah.
trying to outsmart each other.
Exactly. And we got to remember, Pines is the one making the accusations. So he's the one who has to prove it.
Right. He's got to have evidence to back up his claims.
Exactly.
And this brings us back to the whole consent thing.
Right.
Even if what Pines is saying is true,
Yeah.
was he really okay with all this stuff?
That's the tough part, isn't it? I mean, Pines worked for Diddy.
Right.
There's a power imbalance there.
Right.
Even if Diddy never directly threatened him, you can imagine how much pressure Pines must have felt.
Especially in that industry.
Yeah.
Entertainment,
Oh, yeah.
reputations matter. Everyone wants to be on the good side of the powerful people.
Exactly. Pines probably thought that if he said no to any of this, it would be the end of his career.
Right. So even if there weren't any threats,
Yeah.
just the power dynamic itself.
It can be enough to make someone do things they don't want to do.
Right. Because they feel like they have no choice.
Exactly. That's why cases like this are so hard to figure out. It's not always about clear evidence. It's about understanding how power can be used to manipulate people.
Right. Right. And speaking of manipulation, Pines says that Diddy pressured him to keep quiet about that possible COVID exposure at that birthday bash in Turks and Caicos.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound good.
It's not a good look for Diddy.
No.
If he knew there was a chance people were sick and he still kept it quiet, it makes you question his priorities.
Yeah, it really does. And could that mean even more legal trouble for Diddy?
Potentially, depending on what the laws are like in Turks and Caicos.
Right.
He could be facing charges for violating public health rules or being negligent.
It's like we keep peeling back layers of this onion and finding more and more.
And this whole case has gotten people talking about the culture in the entertainment world. We've seen other big names accused of this kind of stuff, too.
Yeah, sure.
Makes you wonder if this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Right, like how much of the spin goes on that we don't know about.
It's hard to say for sure, but the entertainment industry, it's known for being high pressure. Everything moves so fast.
Right.
Lines get blurred. People with power sometimes take advantage.
And there's so much money and fame floating around.
Yeah.
It's easy to see how some people might get caught up in it and think they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, like that old saying, power corrupts.
Right. When you have all that money and power,
Yeah.
it's tempting to think you're above the law.
And that's why it's so important to hold powerful people accountable for their actions. Whether it's through the legal system
Right.
or through public pressure, we need to make it clear that this kind of behavior is not okay.
Absolutely, no matter who you are.
Exactly.
You're not above the law.
Yeah.
So we've got to remember that Diddy is innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
But these allegations alone have sparked this important conversation about power, consent,
Yeah.
and the responsibilities that come with being rich and famous.
And that's a conversation we need to keep having. We can't just ignore these issues.
Right.
We've got to address the things that lead to exploitation, make the industry safer for everyone.
100%.
Yeah.
It's a big challenge, but I think it's possible. By talking about these issues, making things more transparent,
Right.
and holding powerful people accountable, we can create an environment where everyone in the industry feels safe, respected, and empowered.
I agree. We can make a difference. Now, let's switch gears a little and talk about the legal stuff. What could happen to Diddy if these allegations are true? We talked about sexual battery before,
Right.
but there are other charges he could be facing too.
Right. You mentioned sex trafficking before. Can you explain how that might apply here?
Sure. So if what Pine says is true about being forced into these sexual acts under pressure, and if this was part of a bigger pattern of Diddy controlling him, then the prosecution could look into sex trafficking charges.
And how serious are those charges? What kind of penalties could Diddy be facing?
Sex trafficking is really serious. It can mean spending a long time in prison and paying huge fines. It all depends on the specifics of the case and if there are any other factors that make it worse.
So the stakes are really high for Diddy here.
Yeah.
His whole career, his reputation, it's all on the line.
Absolutely. And even if he doesn't end up with criminal charges, just this lawsuit could cost him a lot of money. Pines wants to be compensated for the emotional distress, lost wages, things like that.
It's definitely shaping up to be a huge legal battle.
It is.
And it could have a big impact on both Diddy and the whole entertainment industry.
Yeah, it's a reminder that actions have consequences.
Right.
And no one is above the law.
No matter how rich and famous you are.
Exactly.
This whole deep dive has really made me think it's not just about these specific allegations. It's about power and consent and accountability in an industry that often plays by its own rules.
It's about the real people behind the headlines, the impact on their lives.
Right.
And it makes us question our fascination with celebrity, what the price of fame really is.
And it shows us that we all have a part to play in making the world fairer.
Yes.
Not just in entertainment, but everywhere.
Absolutely. So let's take a break here, and we'll come back for part 3 to discuss the bigger implications of this case and what might happen next.
You know, we've talked a lot about the details of Pines' accusations and what this whole thing could mean for Diddy and the entertainment industry in general. But before we wrap things up, I'm curious about something. You've brought up this idea of a culture of silence in places like Hollywood.
Yeah.
What can we, as people who watch movies, listen to music, consume entertainment, what can we do to fight back against that and make sure people are held accountable?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's not easy to answer, but I think it starts with awareness, just being aware of the power dynamics at play, the pressures people in the industry face, and how those pressures can be used to shut people up.
So we need to be more critical of the entertainment we're consuming, not just taking everything at face value, but really looking deeper, asking questions.
Right, exactly. Like, where did this movie come from? Who made it? Were the actors and crew treated fairly? Did they have a voice? They seem like simple questions, but they can make a big difference.
Because when we start asking those questions, it shows that we care about more than just the end product.
Yeah.
We care about the people involved, their stories, the conditions they worked under.
And that awareness can lead to action. We can support artists and projects that reflect our values. We can speak out against injustice when we see it. We can use our voices and our money to demand better.
So we actually do have power as
Yeah,
consumers.
we do.
We're not just passively watching movies or listening to music.
Nope.
We have a say in how the industry operates.
Exactly. And when we realize that, we can start to push for change,
Right.
more transparency, more accountability, more respect for everyone involved.
That's a powerful thought, and it goes way beyond just entertainment.
It does. It really
It
does.
applies to everything.
Wherever there's an imbalance of power, there's the potential for abuse. And we all have a role in fighting against that imbalance.
So let's talk about the possible outcomes of this Diddy case. What are some ways this could all play out?
Well, one possibility is that it goes to trial, and a jury has to decide if Diddy is responsible for the harm Pines is alleging.
Yeah, okay.
If they find him liable, he could have to pay a lot of money.
Right. And what about criminal charges? Could Diddy actually go to jail?
It's definitely possible, although remember, in a criminal case, they have to prove Diddy did it beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a high bar.
So it really depends on the evidence and how convincing it is.
Exactly. Now, another possibility is that they settle out of court. That happens a lot with these types of lawsuits. It saves everyone time and money and avoids the uncertainty of a trial.
And a settlement could involve Diddy paying Pine some money and maybe issuing a public apology or promising to make changes in his companies to prevent this kind of thing from happening again.
Right, and even if there's no official settlement, Diddy might try to do some damage control on his own. He could release a statement, take responsibility for his actions, donate to charities that help victims of abuse, or create stricter rules within his companies to make sure everyone is treated with respect.
So even if he never faces legal consequences, there could still be reputational damage and he'll have to deal with his own conscience.
It shows that real accountability goes beyond just what happens in court.
Right. It's about owning up to your mistakes and trying to make things right.
Exactly. Well, this deep dive has really given us a lot to think about. It's a complicated case with big implications, and it's definitely one we'll be keeping an eye on as it develops. But as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with this thought. What does this whole situation, regardless of how it ends, tell us about the culture of celebrity and what it really means to be famous? It's something to consider as we continue to enjoy entertainment and hold those with power responsible for their actions.